This was the voters' opportunity to turn out and change that, and they did, because Jimmy Brashear is the undersheriff. That would have been the same regime continuing, and although Jimmy finished second respectively, I think the voters wanted new. They said that, and that's what they're going to get. And so we know Chris Edgar was elected. Steve Dugan was elected as the commissioner for the 2nd District in a pretty one-way race, and then Jeff Vernetti just beat Lisa Thomas in a landslide.
Boy, he beat her like a drum. That was interesting. That was a dirty race.
She beat her like a drum.
That was a dirty race. A lot of money from lobbyists that came in for Lisa Thomas, and I think the numbers I saw is that she outspent him like 20-1.
Yeah.
And he still won big.
Sure.
Wow.
It just goes to show how grassroots, feet on the ground, being in the community matter. And then you saw some of the tactics that I think the Lake of the Ozarks community, they're just too smart. You know, they saw right through it, and they know Jeff Vernetti from his years down here and what he's done. So I wanted to look just a little bit about the voter turnout, right?
Yeah.
We were interested last Tuesday. We didn't have the results. And so for the primary on Tuesday, there were 34,390 registered voters and 10,347 ballots casted, which was just over 30%. And so I look back at the last primary that we had in 2022, and it was 33.89%. So we were down almost 4%, but I thought which was a better tell would be, let's go back to the last presidential election cycle and look at the primary. And in 2020, 34.24%. So we were down not only from the primary in 2022, but even more from the primary in 2020.
Interesting.
And so then I looked at, okay, let's look at the general election. And in 2020, the last time that we had a presidential election, the primary was 34.24%. It was 75.4% for the election. I was like, the general election, 75% turned out in Camden County in 2020.
It's almost unbelievable, because 2022 in the big election, it was just under 55%. So that 75 to 50, that's 20%.
There was no presidential
that's true,
candidate
22.
on 22. So that's huge, though. 55% is massive, but 75%, that was 41% higher than turned out in the primary just 3.5 months previously. And so what that tells me is, with 30% voting in the primary last Tuesday, that we could anticipate 65 to 75%, should see between 23 and 26,000 votes casted. Cast November 5th on this election. And so I just thought it was interesting to look at the numbers going up and down. And for whatever reason, I would say that over the last 3 to 4 years, Camden County has become more engaged, more involved as far as the locals' finger on the pulse. And so I was actually a little surprised to see those numbers down, even though slightly. Talk about 3% in some of these races that could have swayed it. So 3% is a big number, and we'll continue to track those. I love looking at the voter turnout.
Yeah, fascinating.
And I want to see it get higher, and I'd love to see 75% in November.
I'm guessing we'll see a big turnout in November, again, because it is a presidential election.